All right. I am here with Marguerita Cheng, the founder and CEO at Blue Ocean Global Wealth. How's it going, Marguerita?
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. I'm really excited to unpack everything that we were just talking about before we started recording. But before we get into sort of the successes that you've seen and your current projects, let's talk about your background. What got you into business originally?
Sure. So I studied East Asian language and literature and finance. My first job in financial services involved writing a newsletter for English speaking investors. So I had to read financial statements and write quick, compliant summaries. And while the job paid well, I found it a little bit isolating. I didn't really have the opportunity to interact with the investors. Not that I needed to, but it was intellectually stimulating, but I felt like something was missing. And that's when I discovered personal finance and how you could be a financial advisor and help people with their personal finances. So I was in my 20s at this time, and I said to myself, who in the world is going to take me seriously? Who will think that I know anything about retirement? So I spent the next 5 years helping my husband pay off his credit card debt, student loans, prepare this for this CPA certification exam, buy a house, have 2 kids. And at that point, I was like, you know what? I feel like I have some street credibility. I want to take all these concepts we learned in corporate finance and help individuals and families make better decisions.
Nice. Very nice. So you have a pretty deep understanding when it comes to financial planning and wealth management. What do you think the unique challenges, just to get started here, with the female entrepreneurs face when it comes to financial planning and wealth management?
I think that female entrepreneurs feel overwhelmed. Sometimes they feel a little bit of shame and embarrassment. Oh, I think I should know this. And what I want them to know is you do not have to go on this journey alone. You are an expert at what you know, and there are a lot of people who can and will help you along the way. So I think people think that they, and particularly women, feel like, we need to know everything. And if we ask for help, it's a sign of weakness.
Yeah, and I think it very, very well articulated in terms of asking for help is such an underrated thing for people to do when it comes to starting a business, especially. Like, it's just such a crucial part to success, is just being comfortable asking people like, hey, I need help with this. I need help with that. And there's absolutely zero shame. So I totally get that being part of the educational curve. You have a really cool mantra that I was reading about. It says, so many people spend their health to gain wealth, and then they have to spend their wealth to regain their health. And I think it's such a good way of looking at kind of the early part of your career, just burning out and grinding to try and climb this mountain. But what could you kind of tell us about, particularly women who prioritize their business success over personal well-being?
So sure, that mantra, I can't take full credit for that, but I do live my life by that mantra. And when I entered the financial advice profession, I had a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old. I worked very hard. My first year, I acquired 33 clients, 31 from strangers, 32 was someone who knew me from my former life, and 33 was my dad. So I knew how to pick up the phone and set appointments, believe it or not. And one day my boss said to me, he's like, you work so hard. You're working 50, 55 hours a week. Imagine if you work 60. And I looked at him. I said, listen, I don't know how I would do that, because I'd either have to sleep less or not exercise. I have asthma, and it could seem like I could work an extra hour a day. I said, but what's going to happen? It's actually the law of diminishing returns. If I get sick, everything blows up, because I have asthma. Like, I am more vulnerable, susceptible to viruses and so forth. And what's interesting is my answer was so clean. And I said, here's why I just don't think that's going to work. And I was really scared of what his response would be. But he said to me, I don't know what to say to that. That makes a lot of sense. And I was like, wow. And that's when I started to learn that it's okay to advocate for yourself. You just need to be able to back it up.
Yeah, and it's a good segue into pitfalls. I think people people often have these huge mistakes that they make consistently throughout their life, their entrepreneurial journey, whether they're building a business or getting ready to sell a business, whatever it may be. What are some specific pitfalls that you could mention that women face when it comes to, whether it's financial planning or just, starting a business?
So I would say the first thing, as we talked about a little bit, is sometimes being scared to ask for help, worried
Mm,
about judgment. The other thing that I think is important, there are times when we must persevere, right? But there's other times where it's okay to pivot or even quit. I am not telling everybody who started a business to quit. I'm just saying that you have to give yourself permission to try new things with marketing, for example, and see if it works. If it doesn't work, don't try something for a month and say, you know what, it didn't work. But if you give it your best effort, know that it's okay to stop doing something and then move on. So I think that's really important. The other thing that I would say, and this is my pitfall, knowing your strengths. And sometimes our strengths can be our biggest weakness. So I'm very kind, patient, and empathetic.
mm,
That's good, right? People like me, people trust. But it's like my daughters and my son will say, Mommy, you can't be too nice. Don't let people walk all over you. So I think that's really important. One pitfall that everyone faces, but particularly women, is we want people to like us. I think it's better to be trusted and respected.
mm. Well said. So, you've started this company to really help with all different aspects of financial planning and everything. So, let's talk a little bit about what you're doing differently. I mean, I think there's a lot of different companies out there that are doing in this space. So, I'd love to understand a little bit better about what your approach is that's different towards helping women specifically.
I think one of the things that we do that is very different is we actually do not require clients to have a minimum level of investment with us. That does not mean that we work with everybody, but what that means is we will work with people who are committed to the financial planning process. They could be younger, a lot of their wealth could be in their business. I think that is a very important distinguishing factor. There are some clients that I started working with who were 32 and 34 that had $35,000 to invest. And most people will say, well, we don't work with those clients. They don't meet our minimum. And when these clients initially came in, they're like, listen, we don't have a lot of money to invest, but for us, it's a lot. We think we're going to be good clients. And I told them this. I was like, you know what? I love your energy. I love your commitment. And I know you're going to be good clients. So you don't need to sell me that. And here we are, like 16 years later, they're still clients and their portfolio is close to $2 million. You cannot turn people away and say, you know what, I'm sorry you don't meet my minimum, but why don't you come back and see me in 15 years when you have a 6-figure portfolio? It doesn't work that way.
Hmm. Got it. Got it. From 35,000 to 2 million. Love it. Love it. So let's talk a little bit about, the approach that obviously you guys are taking is unique. But I think when it comes to exits, that's what everybody listening to this is interested in. And I've talked to a lot of different wealth managers and things like that on the exit show here. So let's talk about planning. Like when let's say a female entrepreneur is listening to this episode right now, she's operating a business and it's doing super well, and she's about to get ready for an exit. What types of things and in terms of tips for getting prepared for an exit could you share with that woman that's listening right now?
Well, first I would say it's never too early to start thinking about your exit, right? The other thing that I also think is important is, as much as you'd like to find someone like you, understand that that might not be ideal. You want someone who can complement your strengths. And last but certainly not least, I know you love what you're doing. I know that this is your passion. However, it would serve people well, particularly women, to start to build wealth outside of their business. There is nothing wrong with reinvesting in your business. That's what I did. That's what I do. But building wealth outside of your business is going to be important because you may find a successor, you may find a buyer, but by building wealth outside of your business, you're able to help save money and tax for yourself and build wealth, but you're also able to help with attracting and retaining talent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think navigating, whether it's acquisitions or IPOs or any sort of strategic decision, I think there's a lot of assistance that people need, because the different characteristics that I found in people that operate, businesses that scale up to tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, there's very unique characteristics involved in that person, and usually like really tight knit, we'll call it, books and bookkeeping and accounting and all of that usually aren't together. Like to get to that scale, you have to be, pretty bold and aggressive and moving very quickly. And I think a lot of people forget that those types of things are needed to keep together in order to have like a successful exit. You have to be able to pass something that works on to the next person. So I'd love to understand, you were obviously mentioned as a most influential financial advisor by Investopedia, which I think is a huge thing for you and a huge award. So for any women that are aspiring out there that are listening to this, that face, let's call it imposter syndrome, everybody's subject to it. Everybody feels it, but what kind of jolt or motivation could you give them with, their entrepreneurial journey?
Sure. I mean, I love what you said, that sometimes we all encounter imposter syndrome. Maybe we didn't know that that's what it was called, but sometimes when we question, do I belong here? Is this right for me? And what I think is so important, particularly for women, and I think about my journey, many times I was the only one in the room. And I don't mean just gender, race, or ethnicity. When I entered this business, I only had 2 kids. They were 3 years old and 6 months. Then, true story, after I passed the CFP certification exam, super excited, double cause for celebration, passed the exam, and I was going to be giving birth to my 3rd child. I think it's important to know that your story and your journey is going to be different, and it is okay to be different. There's nothing wrong with somebody doing something differently from you. Be open to advice, but that doesn't mean you have to accept all the advice, because it may not resonate with your situation. It may be different. So I would say for anybody who's like, oh my gosh, can I do this? Do I belong here? It's okay to be different. And in fact, remember I said I didn't see anybody like me. Sometimes there was something we call planner of the day, where people would phone in, right? And you had to, like, quote unquote, be available to answer inbound calls. Sometimes we'd say, hey, I want to speak to a CFP, certified financial planner. I'd like a female certified financial planner. You know what? I think this is really important to me. I'm a working mom and I want a female certified financial planner who has kids. Remember how I told you I was different. I didn't see anybody like me. But for purposes of these types of calls, like, I was it. So I think the fact that I was different did, in fact, and in the moment that I didn't hide behind it and I embraced it, it created a lot of opportunities for me. And that's very much related to Investopedia. There are hundreds of articles on a Roth IRA, right? There's 100 articles on tax planning. I make it personal. If you're a mom or a parent, I say mom because I'm talking about me, but for parents out there who are juggling, childcare expenses, here are some ways in which you can use benefits from your employer, so your employee benefits, and tax credits to cover the cost of childcare. Now your child is in high school and a young adult. I'll write and share stories of how I helped my kids with their first job, balance their finances, and open a Roth IRA. So all of a sudden, this is advice that is personal. It's personal finance that is truly that personal.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you mentioned something there about how the I don't know if mirroring's the right word, but I've had multiple women on the show that have talked about a solution to this, like just not only the venture capital debt where women only get, I think it's 2 or 3% of all venture capital out there for their business. And just the level of discrepancy there is pretty dramatic. So I've talked through all different types of solutions. And one of the ones that comes up is exactly what you're talking about of having women on both sides of the conversation can actually level the entire playing field. So the idea that more women are going into venture capital will fund more women looking for venture capital. So it's a very similar concept of you being on the financial and wealth management side and helping people like women that are moms out there can resonate, and actually it helps empower a lot more than people may think. So I think it's a great example and way to view this with, just empowering women out there to make their financial and entrepreneurial endeavors, most importantly, a success. And that kind of takes me into the landscape. What do you see in terms of, any trends that you're noticing around female entrepreneurs and operators with how they, are navigating the entire landscape of their business?
Sure. I mean, what is the necessity is the mother of invention. Women are starting businesses at a much faster rate.
Mm-hmm.
Variety of reasons. Maybe they felt they reached the glass ceiling. Maybe they had a better idea and thought they could do it on their own. Or most importantly, maybe they felt that the structure did not align with their other personal responsibilities and professional aspirations. So I think that women are more comfortable taking the leap. It is so important that all of us support women entrepreneurs, whether you do business with them or provide coaching, mentoring, open your networks. I think that's important. Starting the business is huge, but we want to make sure that these women don't just survive, but also thrive.
Mm-hmm. Well said. And for all the women listening to this, part of the reason that I sit down with amazing people like Margarita is because going through an exit or preparing for one requires a lot of planning, especially on the wealth management and financial side that a lot of people do not think about until it's literally gone through. So I think it's super important to take advantage of different wealth management services out there just to prepare for the impact that it has. And that was part of the whole rationale of having you on the show, was to share your wisdom and everything. And that leads us to the finale question of knowing what you know now. What would you tell Margarita 10 years ago?
So I would tell Marguerite 10 years ago that it is okay to say no and be better about um, establishing and honoring boundaries. Sometimes I felt like it was hustle and grind, grind and hustle. They go back and forth. But sometimes it's okay just to, stop and slow down. You don't need to say yes to every opportunity. And what really brought that to light is my dad was sick for 9 years. My dad had Parkinson's disease. And there was a period in time where I was really running myself ragged. And I know you might say, Rita, you sound like such a hypocrite. What about your mantra? I did not realize how exhausted I was until I stopped. And this happened 3 months after my dad's death. All of a sudden, I just felt like I hit a wall and I was tired. And as it turns out, I had caregiver exhaustion and fatigue. I was severely anemic, and I didn't necessarily do anything bad or wrong. I think that actually happened to me in 2015. So it is within that time frame. What would you tell Marguerite from 10 years ago, that it's okay to take a break? Like, self-care is not selfish, and sometimes we have to reset. So that is exactly what I would tell myself.
Very nice. Very nice. So that leads us to what you're working on today. I know you have a book, Diary of a CFP Pro. But what is it that you're working on today, and what can you share with us about it?
Well, I'm always working on developing engaging continuing education programs for financial advisors so that they can best serve their clients. It's important. Many people say, well, why would you help your competitors be better advisors? I have the abundance mentality. I truly believe that if we do a better job with client engagement and client communication, more people will get help, which is better for society. So I'm working on that. The other thing I'm working on is I'm taking the opportunity to educate entrepreneurs, particularly women entrepreneurs, on how they can establish small business retirement plans that align with their objectives.
Nice. Very nice. Well, those are all the questions that I have for you. Wherever you guys are listening on iTunes or Spotify, all the links that Marguerite mentioned are in the show notes. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me.